Okay, so, if I'm thinking to myself that you're an impatient, disapproving control freak, and you're thinking that your new stepdaughter is a spoiled brat and that I'm an ineffective, lackadaisical parent, how much joy are we going to actually experience?
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hey there, welcome. We are so glad to have you here as always, right? I don't think there's a week that goes by where we're not glad to have you here.
That's true.
Thank you so much for spending some time and joining us today. Almost every week I say something about leaving a rating or a review. And we want you to do that, but I'm not going to ask you to do that today. I'm going to ask you to do something different. I'm betting as we head toward the holidays, I'm betting you've got someone in your circle, probably on your social media. Maybe it's a coworker or a neighbor or a friend, even a family member who is in blended family dynamics,
Right.
and probably has some struggles. So what I'm going to ask you to do is either today's episode or maybe go back and find one of your favorite episodes. Go get to that one and share it out to your social media network and just say why you like that episode and why you like the show. Because I'm betting you want to help those people. And we would love to partner with you in helping those people. So if you can find one that you really like, that you think is valuable, share it out and tell people why you like it. And we would love for you to share that and help us continue to help other people.
Yeah.
So there you go. Now, if you want to leave a star rating and you want to leave a review, I'm not going to stop you. That's for sure.
Go for it.
But would love to be able to spread the word that we're available to help, especially in this season where people are trying to hold on to joy.
Yeah. If you found value in what you've heard on the show, let others know.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
So at the time that we're releasing this particular episode, Christmas is rapidly approaching.
It's coming quick.
Yep. And we know that the holiday season can often be tough for blended families to navigate, which is why we've been sharing some strategies and tools to equip you over the past few weeks.
Yep.
We've talked about negotiating schedules with a former spouse.
One of our favorite things.
Yeah, not really. We've also talked about how to blend holiday traditions.
Now that is kind of one of my favorite things. Yeah.
And last week, we wanted to bring a little hope as you listen to our kids share some of their memories.
And they are some of my favorite things too.
Yes. and there were some positives and some not so positives in there.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah. But today we thought we would explore some things that might come along and try to steal your joy. And not just on Christmas, but really anytime.
That's for sure. Over the years, we've had to learn to manage all kinds of things that came along and robbed our joy. Some of those things that we touched on a bit last week with the kids, right?
Right.
And the reality is there's a lot of situations that blended families seem to come up against that have the potential to steal away joy.
Absolutely. But the truth is we don't have to stay stuck in frustration and pain when waves of challenging circumstances crash up against moments of joy.
Yep.
And it's our hope that today's episode will help you to hold on to your joy, even in the most challenging of circumstances. But first, let's talk about why this can be so difficult. Why does it sometimes feel like those waves of challenge are just relentless, and why we might start to feel the opposite of joy, right?
We've felt that a few times.
Yeah, maybe hopelessness when we're faced with these things that we can't always anticipate or control.
For sure. I've definitely felt that in the past. Back in episode 77, we talked about 3 unique differences that make a blended family marriage challenging. And so we explored kind of the built-in stressors that come along with blending families. And stepfamily expert Ron Deal says that blended family couples swim in a different ocean than first marriage couples. The stepfamily ocean has a cooler temperature. That's the step relationships that tend to have less warmth.
Right.
Most everyone in a step family has experienced a significant loss that's always just under the surface. And the ocean has more sharks, like former spouses, co-parenting issues, and the stress of merging, just to name a few.
Yeah.
And the water's less clear. Step family life is murky. Roles are unclear, rituals and traditions are hazy, and relationships lack definition. To navigate this ocean well requires that you understand and follow healthy blended family principles, because the relational structure of a blended family is different than a biological family. You have to get smart about stepfamily living.
Right.
And Ron goes on to say, couples in a stepfamily have more internal and external stressors on their relationship than most couples.
Yeah, and I'll add that the challenging dynamics of blended family life naturally creates more pitfalls and opportunities for joy to be derailed.
Yep.
And then often it's replaced with pain, confusion, and conflict. And that's why it's so hard to hold on to joy.
Yeah.
And why we sometimes feel hopeless or defeated. But again, we don't have to stay stuck there.
That's right.
So for today's episode, we're going to talk about some of these challenging things that come up against us and why they have the potential to steal away our joy. And then next week, in part 2 of this discussion, we're going to discuss how you can manage the challenges well and hold on to your joy.
Yeah, for sure. Here's a joy robber for you. Unmet expectations and disappointment.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Unmet expectations always lead to disappointment. And unmet expectations are something all of us tend to experience along the way,
Right.
especially around special occasions. You might have some expectations around what you or your family is going to experience, the laughs, the fun, and the connection, right? I mean, who doesn't want to enjoy time with their family?
Right.
Who doesn't want to create special memories together, right? But it doesn't take much to shatter those lofty expectations.
Right. All it takes is one kid who's having a hard time and shows up with a bad attitude or has a meltdown.
Yep.
Or maybe it's your spouse who wakes up on the wrong side of the bed.
Hey, what are you talking about?
And they just can't seem to pull it together and show up well.
Yep.
Or maybe it's an ex-spouse who decides to deviate from the schedule at the last minute. The reality is that unexpected things are going to happen. And those lofty expectations, they seem to go unmet because plans get hijacked by unforeseen circumstances, or when someone is having a bad day and they tend to drag everyone else down with them.
Yeah, I mean, all of that can quickly steal your joy. So instead of experiencing what you expected, now, guess what? You're feeling irritated and disappointed, maybe even defeated sometimes.
Yeah. You know, I remember several times when the expectations I had around our Christmas celebrations were unmet.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd get Annika on Christmas Eve, and we'd open gifts and celebrate Christmas morning before she went to her dad's house. And then there were other years she wouldn't arrive at our house until Christmas midday. That's kind of how the parenting plan played out.
Right.
And I'd have a picture in my mind, or an expectation of how things would play out during our family's time together. We'd all be relaxed, and the general mood for everyone would be happy. Our home would be filled with excitement, gratitude, and love, and we'd all enjoy celebrating together.
Yeah, for
Doesn't
sure.
that sound lovely?
It sounds great, and those, sometimes that happened, but
Right.
not always, right? But then there were those other years where, she was at her dad's house Christmas morning, and we didn't get Annika till midday on Christmas.
Right.
And so the anticipation got really built up as we kind of tried to hold Phoebe and Jacob back for just a little while until she got there. And then we'd wait in excitement for her arrival. And I think we all had a lot of lofty expectations going on in that moment, right? Sometimes it did work out well, and just like the kids kind of shared last week or a couple of weeks ago on the show, they experienced some memorable times together. But then there were these other years where things were a little tense. Right. It was tough, right? And some of that just had to do with that transition of poor little Annika. You know, she's transitioning from one high energy place to another high energy place, and she's just expected to show up with high energy for everybody.
Yeah, she said that she used the word pressure.
Absolutely.
And guilt.
And when that pressure and guilt set in, it was tough. And then our home wasn't filled with excitement or gratitude or love. It was filled more with tension and disappointment and some disconnection for our family.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes Annika's dad would show up late to drop her off or early to pick her up, which either meant waiting around for a late start to our celebration and kind of having to put a pause on things, or navigating an abrupt, awkward end to it. And sometimes Annika would struggle emotionally. She talked a little bit about that, and she simply wasn't able to show up well.
Yeah.
And even though that sometimes created disappointment in us, you know, when I look back in hindsight, we knew that transitions between homes are difficult in general, and the holidays can magnify that.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear the kids have a bit of empathy, meaning Phoebe and Jacob have a bit of empathy for Annika. Like they probably realized they were putting pressure on her to, you know, show up well, and everybody wants to have fun and all that.
Yeah.
And it's just tough. Transitions are hard no matter what. You know, Annika's not the only one who's struggled with things like that. Back in episode 118, we interviewed Lauren Retzema and her mom. And Lauren's a child of divorce, and she's the author of a book called In Their Shoes. We've talked about it before, and we've interviewed, like I said, her and her mom. And during that interview, she shared her painful experiences with holiday transitions, not just when she and her siblings were kids, but even now as adults, the struggle that ensues. So you might want to check that episode out and learn a little bit more about managing transitions and keeping expectations realistic. And we'll drop a link in the show notes. That episode's called Meaningful Insights and Practical Strategies to Help Your Blended Family Navigate Holiday Challenges.
Right, episode 118. Yeah. So we tend to go in with some expectations around what we're hoping to experience. Maybe it's around a special occasion, or maybe it's an activity or experience you want for your family. Maybe it's just an expectation of how everyday family life will pan out for you, right? And when our expectations, whether they're big and lofty or not, when they go unmet or somehow get hijacked, our joy seems to quickly dissolve, and now we're experiencing disappointment.
Yeah.
Maybe even some other painful emotions. Now, the reality is I've lived this out more times than I care to remember. Those times when my joy was just ripped out from under me, and it's really tough.
It is. It is. And so I want to encourage people to think about that. You know, where are your expectations?
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that next week. Yeah.
So let's move on and explore some other situations or potential situations that tend to steal our joy.
Yeah, you're right. Let's move on to the next one. You know, sometimes we are our own worst enemy. Another joy robber that I've experienced over the years is what we call the stories in our head about each other. Right. So we've already touched on this a bit, but when someone seems to be having a hard time in the midst of what should be a fun, exciting kind of family togetherness moment, this seems to just sap the joy out of any experience. I remember our first Christmas after we were married and we were living under one roof. Again, Annika talked about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And what I felt like should have been an awesome celebration turned out to be really challenging. I had a lot of ideas or stories in my head around how I thought you and Annika would behave, and what I experienced was actually a big blindside. So Christmas morning, Annika did a whole lot of unexpected acting out, and you just kind of shut down.
I did.
And that created a lot of tension between us around how to deal with Annika's behavior. And of course, I felt like my joy was being robbed. Now, the truth is, part of that is like a combination of what we just talked about, where things unexpectedly happen, right?
Blindsided you.
Yeah. And the reality is I had some stories in my head about how Annika should be acting and how you should be parenting. And those stories really tripped me up.
And there are lots of stories we tend to formulate in our heads, especially in times of confusion and stress.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves stories about what others think and about what their motives are. We also tend to add meaning or add our own conclusion to their behavior. The problem is we all formulate these stories from our own individual perspectives.
Yeah.
And they tend to validate and affirm our own negative experiences, even magnify them.
Yeah.
And then our stories have the power to cast a negative light onto our family members, possibly an unrealistic or unfair view of them.
Yeah, when a stepchild acts out or withdraws, we often jump to judgment because their behavior triggers some disappointment or frustration or anger in us. When our partner sides with their kids, right, we make assumptions that they love their kids more than us, that will never be a priority. Anybody ever thought that before, right? When someone fails to express gratitude, we come to believe that they don't appreciate anything that we do for them, and they just take us for granted, right? These are stories that start to build. They're narratives, and those ongoing narratives are often a recipe for resentment. And eventually, if we don't get them in check, they lead to a whole lot of disconnection and pain in our family.
Yeah, you know, these negative stories we might be harboring can be insidious.
Oh, yeah.
They creep into our beliefs about each other, and they tend to taint reality. And this is especially true when we experience the trapped teammate or the stranded stranger dynamic.
Right.
Now, as the bio-parent trapped teammate, on that first Christmas that you just talked about, honey, that we celebrated as a family, the story in my head was that you were impatient, disapproving, and controlling.
See, that's a story because I was the little angel.
So I'm wondering, as the step-parent, the stranded stranger in that scenario, what stories were you telling yourself that day?
Oh, well, my story was that Annika was a spoiled brat, and then that you were, just a manipulated parent and unwilling to really step in and parent her. How's that for a strong story?
Okay, so, if I'm thinking to myself that you're an impatient, disapproving control freak, and you're thinking that your new stepdaughter is a spoiled brat, and that I'm an ineffective, lackadaisical parent, how much joy are we going to actually experience?
Ooh, I would say that's a big old fat zero.
Yep.
Right? When we formulate and then we start to believe those stories in our heads, it's pretty unlikely that we're going to have the capacity to hold on to a whole lot of joy.
Yeah.
The truth is, it's our stories that drive our emotions, not the actual circumstances, right? So mastering our emotions is really about mastering our stories. So our joy can get robbed when we've got unmet expectations that lead to disappointment. We talked about that, right? And then we feed that disappointment even more when we formulate stories in our head about each other.
Right.
Right? Okay, so those are two big joy robbers, right? The unmet expectations and disappointment, and the stories in our head about each other. Honey, what else steals our joy on? Isn't this a joyous episode? This is great.
Well, another big one is emotional triggers and conflict.
Oh, we just keep building.
Yeah, we're not telling you anything you don't already know.
Right.
I'm betting anyone listening to our show can relate to this scenario. You're relaxed, you're feeling good, and you're really looking forward to spending time with your blended family. Maybe you've got something fun planned, or maybe you're just sitting down to a nice dinner after a long day. Everything seems to be going smoothly until out of the blue, someone says or does something that rubs you the wrong way.
Oh, yeah. Maybe it's a comment someone makes without really thinking about what they're saying. Maybe it hurts your feelings. Or possibly you and your spouse have some agreements around behavioral expectations for the kids. Your stepchild crosses the line and your spouse fails to follow through on your agreement. Man, that one was a really big one for me.
Yeah, that's a
And
trigger.
I know some of you listening have experienced that because I've talked to you about this, right? Or maybe an ex-spouse sends a nasty text message. Like whatever it is, you've gone from feeling good and relaxed to feeling upset and tense. And maybe you're ready to react to whatever it is you're feeling.
Yes, those and many more stories are ones we hear from blended couples all the time.
Yeah.
And here are the feeling words that couples often use to describe this. They feel unappreciated, attacked, unheard, deprioritized, unloved, disregarded, ignored, disrespected, insecure, misunderstood, fearful, not good enough. I mean, I could go on and on. But I'm sure you already get the point we're making here. It's incredibly easy to get emotionally triggered when you live in a blended family. It seems to happen a lot, much more than we'd like.
Absolutely. Conflict emerging from those emotional triggers is something that's happened to us more times than I want to admit.
Right.
But what we've come to realize is that most of the time, those offensive words or actions are actually unintentional. In fact, we've stopped calling them triggers, and we now refer to them as tripwires. Because, a trigger is pulled on purpose, but a tripwire, it's usually accidentally stumbled over and activated without, ill will or negative intention, right? We don't usually mean to hurt each other, but we kind of unintentionally say or do things that trip us up and cause pain. And sadly, that seems to happen a lot in blended families, and it can steal our joy. What if you could experience a community that's all about healthy support, guidance, and practical strategies that help you thrive in your blended family? Well, now you can. Blending Together is a supportive community for blended family couples just like you.
We've educated and supported hundreds of couples navigating the unique challenges of blending a family. Now we're inviting you to join our community and experience the transformation that awaits you. But you'll need to act fast because we're getting started soon. Blending Together is not just another community. It's a place where you'll find practical, real-life strategies for building unity as a couple.
And creating more connection as a family.
Experiencing partnership in parenting.
And even dealing with that difficult ex.
Blending Together is a safe, growth-focused space where you get to connect with us and, maybe more importantly, with other blended family couples who truly understand what you're going through. Along the way, you'll discover practical tools, guidance, and hope that empower you to find a future full of confidence and connection.
When you join Blending Together, you'll get to hop into a variety of resources like access to our private Facebook group and online learning platform, monthly coaching meetings, monthly Q&As, and you'll even get to vote on the content for our monthly workshops.
Blending a family can often leave couples feeling alone or isolated and stuck. And quality support can sometimes be expensive. That's why we're offering you access to all of this at a super low monthly rate. Because every blended family deserves the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their budget.
That's right. So join us in the Blending Together community and unlock the secrets to successful blending. Together, we can create a future filled with hope, connection, and peace. But don't wait. Click the link in the show notes now. The doors will be closing on October 8th, and you don't want to miss out on this unique opportunity to create the future you really want alongside other couples who genuinely get it. Hey, we can't wait to meet you there.
And when we're on the receiving end of the offensive word or action, as the one who's now feeling something awful and experiencing a painful emotion, it's natural to react in that moment, sometimes without even thinking. And this is where conflict begins. It's the root. Now, honey, you've shared this before, but when I stumble over your tripwire of abandonment, which is the painful feeling you tend to experience, usually it happens when I deviate from an agreement around parenting, right?
I just mentioned that,
So how is it that you naturally react?
I want to lash out. I want to get angry and critical and attempt to kind of take control over the situation, right? Some of that abandonment feeling is like all around things I don't have control over, so I better grab onto some control.
Right.
And in ways that aren't really loving or nice. Would you say that's true?
You react in ways that are not loving or nice.
Okay, all right. I can own that. But I've come to realize over the years that I'm not very pleasant or who I actually want to be when I let that tripwire moment get the best of me.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so your natural reaction to emotional pain is blame and control.
Yep. And when I stumble over your tripwire of inadequacy, which tends to happen when I'm asking you to change something, or maybe I have a complaint, even a legitimate complaint about something, how is it that you tend to react?
Well, I want to shut down and withdraw from you in an attempt to avoid the situation, and then I'll excessively beat myself up.
So when you feel emotional pain, you tend to escape or shame yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And when we each react in these unhealthy ways, the inevitable outcome tends to be conflict.
Of course.
That's what happens to all of us when we feel emotional pain. We react without having the capacity to stop ourselves and really regulate the emotions that are dysregulated in the moment.
Right. And every couple we've worked with seems to have emotional tripwires that set them up to experience something really painful when they get activated.
Yep.
And when they react in their heightened state of emotional pain, they end up in a cycle of conflict.
Yeah. And, earlier you shared some emotion words that we hear from couples all the time. Like those are real words that we hear from others of what they're feeling. Well, when we ask them how they typically react, just like I react with blame and control, and you tend to act, by shaming yourself and pulling away and shutting down, we hear all kinds of different things couples tell us. I love one. I want to get ragey and yell, right? Ragey. I love that, right?
Yeah.
But I get that feeling. Like I don't know if I've ever described it as ragey, but I get it. We've heard I want to become defensive or get anxious. Some people just admit, hey, I just want to go have a drink and numb out. Others say, I'm going to withhold, like I'm going to withdraw, and you're not going to get any of my affection.
Or attention.
Or attention, yeah. Or I'm going to actually withhold information from you so that you don't know what's really going on.
Yeah.
I want to manipulate. I want to withdraw to punish. I want to get sarcastic. I mean, those are just a few.
Right.
Doesn't that sound like just a happy couple?
Yeah.
The crazy thing is, these couples love each other.
They do.
And you know what? You and I love each other too.
Yeah.
But we struggle.
We all have ways or coping mechanisms that come out when we're experiencing emotional pain and that tripwire gets stumbled over.
Totally. And even though these coping mechanisms might feel normal or even justified in the moment, they really aren't helpful because they quickly lead us to unproductive, escalating conflict, or we just shut down and we end up with this big chasm of distance between each other.
Right.
And I don't know anyone who experiences a whole lot of joy when they're enmeshed in the middle of pain and conflict, or they're feeling like they're on the other side of a canyon from the person they love.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've identified 3 pretty tough realities we all tend to come up against in the challenging dynamics of blended family life.
Yeah.
And these things can still our joy. When our expectations go unmet and we experience disappointment.
Yep.
When we make assumptions about each other and formulate stories in our heads, and when a tripwire gets stumbled over and we experience emotional pain that leads to conflict.
Wow. These are like all big, weighty issues that can so easily catch us off guard and quickly destroy that really good mood we were in. The day's suddenly ruined. There's just no joy in sight, right? And if that's not bad enough, there can also be smaller irritants that come along and hijack our joy.
Right.
And when we're already in pain, it's those little things that tend to get magnified and they just keep hijacking more and more joy, right?
Right. Things like the weather, right?
Oh, the weather, yes.
We might experience unmet expectations and disappointment when that birthday celebration in the park that we've been working so hard to plan with water balloons and pickleball now has to be moved indoor because of rain.
Yeah.
Right? I get really grumpy when it rains.
Oh, the weather does impact me, for sure. Yeah.
And I'm typically able to roll with the punches and handle disappointment when the weather is in my favor, right? Which is warm and sunny.
That's
Not
true.
so much when it rains or snows. No.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting about you, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're more resilient in better weather than you are in crummy weather.
It is true.
What about when our spouse innocently does or says something, even something small or kind of insignificant, but it suddenly sets off that tripwire of painful memories or associations?
Right.
One reaction we've heard from people living in blended families is when this happens and someone gets their tripwire tripped, the result is some swift dissolution of togetherness.
Oh, yeah.
We tend to take emotional shelter with our biological kids, right? All of a sudden, this biological divide kind of splits the house, and we end up in two separate bio camps.
And far from joyful, this disconnection or break in the family can be so painful.
Yep.
But sometimes when we get triggered by even minor things, it often leads us to feel unsafe because we associate the current situation with a painful one from our past.
Yep.
And when that happens, we might be compelled to seek safety with those we know best and with whom we share that deep emotional bond with.
Yeah, your bio kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got some big things and maybe some smaller things that can blindside us and keep us from experiencing the joy we really want for ourselves and for our family. And as you're listening to us talk about all of this, your joy might already be waning, or maybe you're shaking your head yes, as we've described these joy-stealing scenarios, because you've been there, maybe multiple times. And you might even be dreading the holidays or resisting any excitement or hope that you'll experience joy when your family is together because these joy stealers have ruined things for you in the past and for your family.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? We're not talking about this to get you depressed or, get you all discouraged either. We're doing it for two reasons. First, we want you to know that you're not alone in your struggle with holding on to joy. We've been there. We've talked to countless others who've also experienced these exact same joy stealers. And it happens because these dynamics are tough. But just because things are tough sometimes doesn't mean we can't discover new ways to hold on to our joy.
Right. And the second reason we're talking about all of this is because one of the best ways to hold on to more joy is to become fully aware of what it is that's stealing your joy.
Yeah.
We all need to develop an acute awareness of our dynamics and how they tend to impact us emotionally so that we aren't blindsided or overwhelmed or crushed by disappointment, hopelessness, or defeat. We need to be fully aware of what's happening when we're confronted with these joy-stealing dynamics.
That's right.
And when we're feeling stuck.
Yeah. And if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you know that we don't want you to stay stuck.
No.
We want you to experience more joy and be able to celebrate some wins. And that's why we're talking about those things that have the potential to come along and ruin our day and steal our joy. Because next week, we're going to be offering some helpful strategies, tips, and mindset shifts that you can try when you notice something's about to steal your joy.
Right.
So you don't want to miss next week in episode 152, where we're going to share how we've learned to hold on to our joy even in the midst of really painful blending dynamics.
Right.
This week, I just want to challenge you to think about, is there something stealing my joy? Am I experiencing some unmet expectations? What stories do I have in my head about my stepkids, my spouse, and what are those tripwires that I might be experiencing this week that tends to be stealing my joy? Just name them, maybe even write them down.
Yeah.
And next week, we'll talk about how to battle them. But for now, that's going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.